Welcome into TYT's The Conversation. I'm your host, Adrienne Lawrence, and today I have for you APPI, Victory Alliance Executive Director. That is Varun Nikore. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good to be with you, Adrienne.
Yes, so Varun, there has been an uptick in violence against Asian Americans. And as we're remembering the victims of the Atlanta spa shooting, which happened about a year ago, what do you think people are missing about how things have essentially continued to escalate against Asian people here in the United States?
Well, I think it's sort of defied in many respects conventional thinking that perhaps when COVID was on the decline, as it has been the last several weeks, that it would lead to a downtick in violence. And of course, that's not happened. It's still on the rise. And unfortunately, the cases just get more and more gruesome with what we've heard in New York City the last several weeks and frankly, around the country.
Yes, they definitely have. And we've noticed that it has been just an increase in violent incidents against largely women. Is that accurate?
That's right. The vast majority of incidents have happened. It's gender-based violence. And it's really, I think, confounded a lot of experts, policymakers, and there's several things we can attempt to do, but I think for the most part, we have to sort of demystify who the AAPI community is in the United States. And I think then and only then can we get down and drill down to sort of what the root causes of a lot of this violence really, is sourced from.
And so can you help demystify that?
Yes, so we represent a community that are origins from 25 nations in Asia that span on the west from Iran all the way to the Pacific Islands. We represent the origins of more than half the globe's population. And we are certainly not monolithic in any respect. There are, I'm sure, through lines and common threads amongst many of our peoples, but we speak over 100 languages and dialects. We've come to this country, Chinese and Japanese Americans have been in this country for 10 generations or longer. And we also have a large immigrant population. 60 to 65% of AAPIs are first generation immigrants. And so that is sort of the vastness, the complexity, the intergenerational nature, some of the language barriers that we face as we arrive in this country. And I think we need to really be doing more research on our community. We are probably one of the least studied demographics in the United States. Of course, the fastest growing, and we have been since the year 2000. And so there's a lot of things to really understand about this very complex community. And I think we need to make some reasonable investments, unreasonable investments, I really should say, going forward, because we are on track to be the largest minority group in this country in the next 20 years if current trends hold.
And as you mentioned, the AAPI community is a very large and vastly diverse one at that. And so when it comes to that uptick in violence, are you seeing the attack primarily on one particular subset, such as East Asian, Southeast Asian?
It's primarily East and Southeast Asian. Anybody that looks Asian in many respects. Occasionally we have seen violence against the South Asian community, but that's been a little less so. A year ago, when we had the horrific shootings in Atlanta of the spa workers, about 2 weeks later, there was a similar incident, a shooting at a FedEx facility in Indianapolis, and that was primarily against Sikh Americans who were, turban-wearing Sikhs, and so. But in this case, it's been predominantly female. It's been predominantly East Asian.
Really seems to reflect the intersectionality of this crime in terms of assaulting these women. And so can you speak to it all why they're targeting women in particular?
I think, quite frankly, in some respect, they are easy targets. And it's primarily males attacking females. And so I think they in these incidences, it's primarily, I think, men going after females who are the most vulnerable, who are in some cases maybe easy to attack because they might not fight back, or they might not know. Of course, somebody was pushed off a subway platform, right? And it's caused a lot of in New York City, and it's just caused a lot of angst and a lot of nervousness and fear for people to even go out of their own homes. And it really is, quite frankly, probably one of the most vicious things that we're facing in society right now. Of course, there's other groups that have been targeted historically. Right now, it just seems to be our community.
Okay, and so they are targeting primarily Asian women of East Asian origin. And I'd love for you to talk just a little bit about why particularly East Asian. We talked about women, but why is it still being the target?
Well, of course, it was sourced by our last president, who used vicious rhetoric to coin the virus as the China virus. And it sort of led from there. And I think a lot of that rhetoric is still permeating throughout the country. And people just want to have somebody to blame for the last 2 years of lockdown.
Okay. And would you say that there's anything that can be done to help reduce these instances of what seem to obviously be hate crimes?
Well, federally, the administration actually passed a law last May during AAPI Heritage Month. That has not really led to much and was criticized by some. There are some in our community who feel, for example, there needs to be more police enforcement, and some who feel that perhaps that is not the best thing that we should be doing right now. But I really have to say, I think a lot of folks are rather confused about where we go from here. And that's why I really focused a little earlier when I mentioned that we're the least researched, one of the least researched communities in the country, is that because our community is so vast and diverse and still fast growing, has these language barriers, that we need to spend more money on researching the dynamic, the interplay with our community, being in the United States as one of the newer immigrant populations. I think then and only then can we come up with additional policy prescriptions. Right now, we just don't have enough. We don't know enough about our communities, and if we don't know enough, we're, I think, just tinkering at the edges about what really can be done to stop a lot of this vicious hate and crime that's being perpetrated against our community right now.
No, I would definitely say that there is a lot of knowledge out there, and that it all leads to white supremacy. And once we acknowledge that, and also our roles in that system, and how we and certain groups also uphold white supremacy and also the male patriarchy, then we can start to see how this interplay plays out. Because what I have seen in instances where you have this kind of almost interracial violence that is perpetuated by people of marginalized groups against one another, that as a result of that's essentially just a play on white supremacy. And so when we continue to have this oppressive structure system, then we are going to continue to have behavior like this, where you have people fighting amongst themselves, so to speak, as opposed to attacking the system that holds them all down. But as people continue to recognize that we need to stop this at every level, and we also need to work together to fight against this, is there anything in particular your organization is doing at the Victory Alliance?
Well, a year ago, we launched the first ever AAPI think tank in the nation, centered here in Washington, D.C., where I am. But that is just sort of, the first inning, right? We're just getting off the ground. But I agree with everything that you said about white supremacy. And, traditionally, I would say if the white supremacy movement has had traditions in our country. Of course, they've had long traditions in our country. Our people were sort of held up as a wedge to divide Asian Americans against Latinos, against Blacks, against even indigenous populations in this country, the so-called minority myth, the well-known model minority myth. And so now it seems that, perhaps while in some sort of really weird way we were held up as models, now we're being attacked, and we always have been, but now it seems to have reached this unimaginable height, and we really have to, call it what it is. It's white supremacy. Absolutely agree with what you had said.
Yes, that's something we do have to call it what it is, and we also have to address it, attack it, see what we are doing to uplift it and dismantle that. And I think that will all put us in a better position to truly have a more egalitarian society. So for anybody who wants to get involved and to uplift your organization or to get more information, where can they go?
Certainly on our website, AAPIVictoryAlliance.com, Action AAPI on Twitter, Action AAPI on Instagram.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate you and all the work that you do in uplifting the AAPI community. And my heart goes out to my Asian brothers and sisters in terms of the oppression that they are facing and these violent attacks. And if you are out there and you see something, don't just say something, intervene to the extent that it would be safe. And please learn more about what's going on around you and how you can interfere and stop it. So I want to thank you so much for joining us, Varun Nikore. That's AAPI Victory Alliance.